Hi, Nikki.
Hi, Dawn.
Welcome to your Author on Demand private reading. I'm
I'm glad to
especially,
be here.
oh, thank you, Nikki. It's really going to be nice to read to you today because we've been connected through our writing from the very beginning, meeting through Dan Blank's group, Human Centered Marketing, which has been a godsend for me, and I know probably for you too.
Yeah.
And your book came out just a couple months before mine did. If you've got it there, why don't you hold it up and give us the
Okay.
title?
It's Fear, Folly, and Freud, a psychotherapist in psychoanalysis. So it's the story of my decade in psychoanalysis and all my struggles and frustrations and
Mhm,
um,
mhm,
joys.
mhm,
So
mhm. That's terrific. It's going to be interesting because we share an appreciation of therapy. It'll be interesting to see what common themes are working through all of our work, yours, mine. So you asked me to read The Inward, a Prayer of Thanksgiving. So I'm going to read it. And then after I read it, I'll give you a chance I'll ask you what jumped out at you for you today.
okay.
The Inward, a Prayer of Thanksgiving. After Thanksgiving dinner, candles flickered hypnotic shadows across my living room walls. Dessert plates and wine glasses cluttered the coffee table. I perched on a footstool in a relaxed version of the thinker. I'd given up the comfortable seats to my companions, friends who were members of my meditation group. Our relationships were forged from the inside out. I knew little about their personal histories. We shared a curiosity about the ultimate mystery. We'd unconsciously formed a circle after dinner, as we did every week. If a bell had sounded, we would have slipped right into meditation. Grant, stiff and angular as origami, had claimed the wooden rocker to my left. Opera was Grant's hobby, and when the acoustics of a room tempted him, he turned into an Italian tenor. It was always a treat to watch him fall in love with his favorite music during every impromptu performance. Slouched in an overstuffed chair directly across from me was Ben, prone to observing from the background. We were a couple in a tenuous stage, still finding our way together, as yet unsure about the direction of our commitment. Grant's wife curled up in a chair next to Ben. Rhonda snuggled into the couch. She caressed the velvet as she lamented her unsuccessful attempts to find a girlfriend. She and I met for lunch, where we explored secret corners of our lives, the hurts that had turned us into seekers. Another married couple was squeezed in next to Rhonda, completing our accidental circle. For the evening, our Dharma discussions were set aside while we gossiped about celebrities. The internet had buzzed in outrage that week over a white stand up comic who had shouted racial slurs at black hecklers. We shook our heads and tut tutted his behavior. He was worse than the hecklers. Can't imagine what he was thinking. Showed his ignorance. I wished one of my guests would ask, "So, Dawn, as an African American woman, what do you think?" But they were tripping over their color blindness, going out of their way to act as though I were one of them. I felt like the elephant in the middle of the living room, worried that somebody was about to make an elephant joke. I crossed my legs. Grant folded his hands in his lap and bowed his head. When he raised his gaze, he seemed to focus inward, like the pause before an aria. My dad was racist. He called his employees niggers. I froze. The slightest twitch, and everyone's attention would probably turn to me. Grant's expression gave away no sign that he objected to the fact that his dad was a racist, no sign that he worried about my reaction, no sign that he cared about me. If only he would flinch. He didn't. Grant said nigger like he'd said it 10,000 times before. Yeah, my dad too. It was Rhonda on the couch. She was hugging one of my chenille pillows. Nigger all the time. I glanced in her direction, catching Ben in my peripheral vision. I wanted him to rescue me, but his posture was unchanged, as though he hadn't heard. Unwilling to acknowledge the doubts and questions now swirling between us, I blinked him out of view. My tongue turned into a thick, dry lump. My hands went cold, my face hot. I braced myself, certain the first two blows portended a third. Speak up, Dawn. But speaking up meant risking a scene. My whole life, I'd been taught, don't make a scene. If only the evening would rewind to 15 minutes earlier when I had been safe and my guests had been innocent. The N-word had just downgraded them from friends to them, people from whom I needed protection. In college, my classmates who'd grown up in poor Black neighborhoods had insisted, you cannot trust white people. No way, no how. I had disagreed. If that were true, you'd have to indict my family. My white stepmother, younger brother, baby sister, maternal great-grandmother. But as I grew older, my mistrust grew. I suspected white people sprinkled racial slurs into their conversations within the confines of their private lives. My suspicion congealed as I attended on-the-job diversity workshops and after-work cocktail parties. It seemed the more I got to know acquaintances who were white, the closer I got to a danger zone. They forgot, or didn't mind, that I was in the room. And then a comment slipped out. What shattered me was the ease with which it slipped. On Thanksgiving, my mood muffled the small talk, like a radio station just out of range, until the evening lumbered to an end. The next few days, I waited. Ben should care enough to bring it up. No, I should bring it up. No, he should. I waited for the others to call, to say, I'm sorry Grant and Rhonda were so insensitive, or to say, hope you're okay. Maybe they'd been afraid to voice their sympathy. Maybe they'd been brought up like me, don't make a scene. Maybe they'd find the courage in a phone call or an email. My phone remained dead quiet. My inbox empty. I waited for anger to fire up. Wouldn't it feel better to throw something? At who? Grant and Rhonda for saying it? Me for not speaking up? Ben for not rescuing me? Buried under a comforter, I lay in bed, slipping restlessly towards sleep, when hurt, rage, and betrayal erupted. I flung back the comforter, kicked the sheets, beat up the mattress. I cursed out the entire white world. I screamed into my pillow, the trumpeting of a wounded elephant. My tangled bedding was damp from tears and sweat. It would never end. I would never be safe. Hopeless. You get to hopeless by sinking. I sank through dreamlike images of shackles, chains, branding irons, whips, ropes, nightsticks, burning crosses, and fire hoses. Bloodhounds on my trail, police dogs at my throat. I crashed through all the places that are supposed to be safe: schoolyards, lunch counters, courthouses, church basements. From nigger to nigger to colored to Negro to black to African American and back again. Strange fruit. The storm subsided. On the other side of hopeless, there was calm. I got up, washed my face, climbed back into bed, and the calm revealed an unwelcome path forward. I had to talk to them. The Buddha said, "Take refuge in the Sangha, your community." That was a double paradox. First, the Sangha had ambushed me. Second, the great teacher would have shaken his head at the notion of protecting myself. Protecting who? The Buddha did not advise me to turn away from conflict. His teachings assured that if I examined my experiences, good and bad, I would discover something pure. He challenged me to look for myself rather than accept his words untested. I was compelled to look. I was compelled to unravel the mystery. Rhonda and I went out to dinner, a date we had scheduled weeks before Thanksgiving. After our meal, she was going to accompany me to a magazine launch where she'd be a cheerleader while I read. I pushed broccoli around my plate. Pleased Rhonda wanted to support my performance, but also worried about broaching the subject of the N-word. She might protest, label me hypersensitive. I could end up feeling worse. I'm not sure how to say this. Thanksgiving night, I felt attacked. You said the flash of recognition on her face stopped me. She clenched her gut. Oh God, I feel like that when somebody says dyke. We both winced. The word encompassed all the slurs I'd overheard about lesbians, as well as those I'd endured about myself. She touched my hand. I'm so sorry. Neither of us moved, even our breath too quiet to trouble the peaceful space that held us. She nodded. Thank you, she said. I didn't understand the thank you, but my intuition said the understanding was irrelevant. I approached Grant after a Sunday morning meditation. Remember Thanksgiving? What you said? It hurt me. It still does. He towered over me by a foot. I certainly didn't mean to. I'm sorry if I did. His expression betrayed no emotion. I walked away, disappointed, but resigned. I had done my best. In fact, the apology was his best too. Time to let it go. Wednesday evening, after another group sit, I buttoned up my coat and was waving "see you next week" to the regulars when Grant tapped me on the shoulder. His eyes were brimming. His voice cracked. He said, "You really got to me. That night I was talking about my dad, but I see myself. It's painful realizing how hard my heart is. I'm deeply sorry, and I want to thank you." His face was flushed, but his gaze was soft. Surrounded by empty chairs and the bustle of departing friends, we recognized each other. I was afraid to talk to Ben. For us, it was bigger than race. It was about relationship. The conversations with Rhonda and Grant had tempered my desperation for rescue and given rise to an unfamiliar sensation. I wanted to understand Ben as much as I wanted him to understand me. I'd never felt that way about a man. The road ahead loomed with difficulties for us, but for the first time, I saw the road. It would never end. I will never be safe. And yet, the gratitude Rhonda and Grant expressed enveloped me as well. I was mystified. In the collision of our lives, I discovered something pure, an alchemy that transformed profanities into prayers of thanksgiving. Nikki, now that you've heard it in my own voice, what's jumping out for you today?
Oh, I just feel so moved by your words. When I think about, the writing part, I love how you have all the senses involved and all the description and everything. And that's so inspiring to me. And then when I think about what did I feel, it's like I don't really have words for that deep hurt that you felt and that you were so brave to recognize and speak about. That's just so inspiring to me. The hopelessness that you expressed, and then finding the way through that. Another inspiring thing. I guess I'm just inspired. Let me just think for a minute here. Two things right in the beginning when you were describing people around the table and sitting, I just realized how much I miss just having people here, you know. I have my grandparents' oak table, and it stretches out, and I have a picture with all my children and my grandchildren around it, and I mean, I just miss that so much. So when you described that was like, that touched me about missing being together in person. And then the next thing that you said was about that the hurts are what lead us into being searchers and seekers. That feels true. And, you know, thinking about how I've tried not to feel those hurts, and I've tried to rise above those hurts. You know, I write about that in my book, and it's like feeling the hurts is where the gold is, you know, and where the growth can come. So I just totally admire you for, and thank you. It's interesting when you say people thank you and you didn't know what. It's like people thank me for my book sometimes, and I think, what, you know? So gratitude, I guess, is just so something that we feel, and sometimes we don't understand it, but it's there.
And so, yeah, you mentioned that I didn't understand what they were thanking me for. And now I get a chance to ask you, because you just thanked me. Do you know what it was for?
Yes, it was for being so courageous and like knowing yourself enough and trusting yourself, which is what I want to do for myself. But you did it, and I thank you for that. I mean, I just, because it takes so much courage to do that. So I just thank you for that, going inside and then bringing it back outside and putting it into words. And that's hard stuff. It's hard to do. So I thank you. That's what I thank you for. Does that make sense?
Does it, tell me, does the situation at all seem familiar in any way? A lot of us have been in situations where we hear another person say something that feels like we ought to speak up. Our guts are saying, oh, that was wrong.
You froze for a minute, so I didn't hear.
Um,
You said,
have you been in a situation where you've heard someone say something that in your gut you knew was wrong and did or did not speak up?
yes. I think, I mean, if I'm honest, I would say I probably did not speak up more than I spoke up. Yeah, and that feeling of, oh, I don't like this,
Mm-hmm.
and what am I going to do? And yeah, that's
Mm-hmm.
familiar.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you a real nosy question because you spent 10 years in therapy. So
Oh, more than 10
you
years.
used to talk about stuff like this. Yeah, more than 10 years, both sides. um, before I read it and after I read it, and I want to make it a yes or no question, what feelings felt different before and after I read it for you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Um, I hardly know what to feel when somebody has read my work. Right before when I was getting ready to sign on, I had a message in Messenger from
Mhm.
an old high school classmate, a man, Lyle, who had read my book. And he said some things about how that probably took a lot out of you to put that down and to write it down. And the last 10 years have taken a lot out of all of us, he said, which I thought was a really interesting way for him to tell me that he understood um, that it was hard. And um, so I feel, I mean, I've never really known this person, but now I feel closer to him um, because of that. And I don't know. I think I felt kind of separate from my book since it came out. Um, and like, what is in there? And I reworked it so many times, um, and so I kind of just let it go for a while. And the other day I read a little bit of it. I can't remember why even, but I thought this is okay. This is pretty good. I was reading about the oceanic feeling, and um, so I feel like I'm getting away from your question. Um, I guess I don't know for sure how I feel when somebody has read my book. I feel kind of naked, and I mean, it makes me want to ask you, how do you feel after reading some your essays? Um,
By the time I get to this point where it's um, finished and on paper and published, and I've read it out loud, um, I'm through the emotions of that particular situation. They're accessible to me, but I'm through them so that I'm in a different zone when I read to an audience. And then reading to an audience is this feedback loop where everyone's rooting for you. And that's a really nice feeling, and you can see it in people's faces. I'm not disconnected from the content, but I'm not sunk down into the original hurt.
Okay. That may be a way that I could think about my book too. It's like that working with the therapist, and I mean, I thought I would never tell anybody what happened there. It was way too weird, you know. But now I did, and I thought it was so important that people know that it's kind of different now in a way. I do feel kind of naked sometimes, but mostly it's almost like that was me before. Um, but then maybe I wonder, like, what do you think about the me before? You know, what's the um, what do other people think about how crazy I was, or how defended I was, or but I mean that's their perspective, and I did it my way. So
Yes, that's one thing I've learned through writing is that that's a feedback loop too, and it's released into the world without any control over the outcome and what the reader takes from it,
right,
how the reader responds.
right,
So I write with an intention, but also knowing that there's no control over the other people's outcomes. So
right.
that really helps ease one of the stresses of writing.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. It's been neat to talk to another writer about this.
Well, boy, I just love reading your writing, and it's so helpful, and so I'm so glad to talk to you. It's amazing
Uh,
it happened.
well, Nikki, thank you for letting me read to you today.
You are
I'm
most
going
welcome.
to end the recording, but we can stay on and chat for a while afterwards.
Bye.